Hi, this is Dave Mason, singer-songwriter, producer, and you're listening to Talking Blues.
I am curious to find out how music came into your life, how you first fell in love with music.
Well, played in, sang in choirs and school bands, and ever since I was in school, basically.
You quickly fell in love with the guitar. Tell me, and I guess a lot of instrumental guitar bands. Tell me about that.
Well, guitar was. I mean, we were. I'm basically from that era where contemporary music was just in the early stages, um, coming out of the late 50s, out of the 50s, and coming out of a world war. And so I just got interested in guitar, mostly from the band The Shadows.
I know that your first instrument, although short lived, was the ukulele.
Not really. Um, my first instrument was an attempt at the violin,
Oh,
um, which was very brief. Ukulele was just something found in a trash can cover, which I cover a lot of that story, a lot of all that stuff in the book, in my book, Only You Know and I Know.
which is an excellent book, by the way.
Yeah, thank you.
How did you decide to come write that book? Was that a difficult process?
Just badgered into it by fans. So basically, just finally, um, we decided, mostly because of the only reason I really finished up doing it was because of my co-author, Mr. Chris Epting, without whom it would never have gotten written. Since I don't had no diaries, no. Since I had no diaries, and really no, my memory is not that great. So, thanks to him and his research, I was able to get it done. But was very instrumental in basically piecing the times, places, and events together.
Well, it's a fascinating book because you have led a fascinating life, and what struck me is how many things happened so quickly. I know you mentioned the ukulele, which was short lived. You got a guitar shortly after that. I think around the age of 12 or 13. But very quickly, soon after that, you were in a band. By the time you were
Oh yeah.
15, playing instrumentals, a lot of guitar instrumental songs, and then by the time you're 18, you're writing songs and making a name for yourself. And it probably didn't seem like that quick to you, but it's pretty amazing how many things happened to you early on in your
Well,
life.
you got when you're young, with that young, you don't you can you can cram a lot in, and you don't really you know I didn't since I had no other responsibilities in my life. It's not so hard when you're young to sort of do that.
How easily did playing the guitar come to you?
Uh, I just had to learn. It's like anybody else. I mean, I'm just self-taught, so I learned just playing things from playing records, basically, and just slowly learned what to do, what strings to use, what picks to use, the whole process really was just a learning curve, like anything. But I didn't have any lessons or anybody around to really show me. So I got to pick it all up things I read, things that, watched. So it's just a very kind of slow process.
Slow process, but I mean, you started playing around by the time you're 15, you were in one
Well,
or
I was a
two
little older
bands
than
by
that.
that
Maybe
time.
I'd be 16, 17 or so by the time we would put some bands together. But then, you had to learn, as much as I was basically about guitar, you had to learn what were the current hits of the day were. So you had to learn, you had to learn to sing, which basically wasn't really learning for me since I'd been in choirs. But you had to include, you know, local things that were hits in order to get little, local gigs at pubs and maybe school dances, whatever. But sort of, just- and pretty much a pretty wide variety of stuff. Basically, that I would, from jazz, blues to just contemporary pop. So there was a little bit of a range that I'd listened to, and then over as the years sort of progressed, I was listening to a lot of very diverse music, really. So it sort of influenced me in a lot of ways.
When did songwriting come into your life?
First song I ever wrote was for Traffic, and it was their biggest hit. Called it was a hole in. Mm-hmm.
Hole in my shoe.
Yeah, a little fantasy song, which I'm actually currently turning into a children's book.
Oh, interesting. That's pretty amazing that the first song you would ever write would be a hit.
Yeah, yeah.
Did songwriting come easy to you?
No, nothing comes easy.
Why do you say that? I mean,
It doesn't.
I
You got to work for it.
okay, but that song, how difficult was it to write that song?
I don't really remember. It's so long ago. It's very much a studio track. It's not something that's very easy to. Today it'd be easier to do it, but back then was not really a song to really reproduce live. So it's very much a studio track.
So the fact that you're thinking about writing a book, children's book around it, tell me how that came about.
It just occurred to me a few months ago that it might make an interesting little children's book. That's it. Nothing dramatic. Um, along with and the book would include the song. So we found what a great illustrator, and we'll see what happens.
Will you re-record the tune
I have re-recorded it. Yes.
for the purpose of this book?
Yeah.
You joined Traffic, wrote that song, but before long you decided to leave the band after the first album or during the first album.
Yes, I did.
Can I ask you why?
Well, it was just mostly because it was just too much. It was too much, too soon, too quick for me. The the success uh, of it actually was just a little for me. Basically, I'm just a country boy. It was just a little overwhelming. So yeah, I quit.
But I mean, at that point, I don't know if the album had already been released or not. But
Yeah,
what did you feel?
yeah.
I mean, how was the success affecting you?
I didn't really, to be honest. I really didn't think of it one way or the other. I just knew that I just it was just I don't know. It was kind of odd. I mean, I just couldn't deal with. I couldn't deal with that much success that quick. I guess I it just was a little overwhelming for me. Basically, that's all I can really say about it.
In a way, it seems like a very mature thought. And we're talking your early 20s at this point?
Yeah, I'm probably 20, probably around 20 years of age.
But not too long after that, you went back with the band and recorded the second album.
Well, that was basically I was here in the States, and I was in New York, and they were actually in New York. The three of them were in New York recording the second album. I think it was at the record plant. So naturally went by to say hi and see everybody, and they only had 5 songs of which to do with the album, and I got 5 songs. So one of them be feeling all right. So it was like, well, okay, great. Well, you're back in the band, okay? So and that's how that happened.
But then, before the album was released, or before you went on the next tour, they kicked you out of the band.
Well, that was a whole other mm, mishigash stuff, yeah, and all that is in the book.
It, I mean, it's you have a very complicated relationship with that band throughout your life.
Um, well, at that point, it was really not no more complicated. That was the end of it. Steve Winwood didn't want me in there, and that was the end of that.
Right. However, you do get back with them and go
Well,
on a tour.
we Welcome to the Canteen came along later, which was basically lasted for a minute. Unfortunately, could have gone on, but didn't. Um, could have gone on. It could have been actually it could have been something and actually would have been pretty successful for us. Was would have been around the induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2004.
Right.
But that turned into a fiasco anyway. So
That the album, Welcome to the Canteen, was a very meaningful album to me. I spent many a days listening to that album. How
oh.
did you feel about that album?
um, it was. I mean, as an album, I don't know. It was okay. It was. I mean, it was what it was. It was we were together. We were doing shows, and they recorded it, and and that was. I didn't really think much of it, frankly, past that, other than the opportunity to have carried it on with the band and actually made an album and taken it somewhere.
I mean, I think of it as a Traffic album, but it's I guess nowhere on the album does it mention Traffic. It mentions everybody's name.
Yeah, well, at that point they sort of they'd recruited a bunch of people that know, at that point they and then Eric Clapton, I mean, had gathered up a group of people that I'd been playing with for 2 or 3 years prior to all that, i.e., Jim Gordon, Carl Radle, all those people. So I'd been playing with all those people with Delaney and Bonnie for 2 or 3 years prior to any of those guys knowing who they were.
What did that Delaney and Bonnie band mean to you? Because they had a hit with one of your songs. You're definitely a part of that band.
I
What
was
did that
with them
band
for a
mean to
couple
you?
of years. They were Delaney and Bonnie. Well, I up to move to America basically in '69, and the reason I did it because there was nothing for me in England, and I wanted to go, and I basically decided, you know what, I need to go where all contemporary music started, and that would be America, which is where it all started. You know, the English, we English just basically copied everything coming out of America and sold it back to them, put our own spin on it. I mean, that's what we did. Um, Everything except, true country music is all started in America. The rest of it's like basic real country music, which is basically got its roots in Europe. But jazz, rock, blues, country, it's all American music.
Hmm.
So I wanted to come here and be where the source was. And the source for me turned out to be Delaney and Bonnie, which were a lot of great musicians from the South and just great, it's an awesome band, great players, and that's how that all got together.
Did the success of the first solo album, of your first album, did that surprise you in any way?
Well, I was, as much as I'd done a solo album, I really wasn't ready for a solo career. Yeah.
Interesting,
I mean,
because you didn't.
you make it, I mean, you make an album with the thoughts of it wanting to be a hit for sure, but
I would imagine it must have sold quite well.
it was a gold. It was basically a gold album. It's probably gone on to be platinum. but I just got gold for it. But I'm pretty sure that people were on the second, third, and fourth copies of it. I mean, it was like the album for a long time. It was Desert Island Picks. It was played like crazy.
I wonder, a few years ago, you decided to revisit that album and do Alone Again.
Went together again. Yeah, I did. I redid it just as a, I don't know. I just a couple of the two or three of the songs I wanted to elaborate on. I had a different version of World in Changes. I don't know. It was just. I thought, what the hell? These are good songs. I've been playing them live for a long time, and I just thought, well, why not just re-record them?
I wonder what that. I mean, I know you've been playing it through some of those songs throughout your whole career, but I wonder what it was like to revisit that album as a whole and then re-record those songs.
Well, the songs are basically still good songs. They hold up. Um, so it was pretty. Like I said, I mean, I've been doing those songs for a long time, live, a lot of them. So it was no big, there was no big, you know, thing about it. It was just, let's just re-record it, see what happens, basically. you know.
Okay, the other thing about you is that you found yourself in pretty amazing musical situations, like playing All Along the Watchtower with Jimi Hendrix,
Mhm.
like recording with Paul McCartney or George Harrison, Graham Nash.
Yeah.
What is it about you that got you into all these amazing situations? I mean, some of those songs are classics, and you're part of that.
My wonderful magnetic personality. I don't know. I was just in the right place at the right time. Um, I mean, really, that's basically all it was. It really wasn't any. It wasn't a lot more than that. I mean, I was just, that was my world that I lived in. Was music, and a lot of the people I sort of known either well or just casually. And some of them, Hendrix came out of basically when I was in between when I'd left traffic and was in England, and it was very easy to run into. It was very easy to really get to know anybody because everybody was in one place in London. Everybody went to the same clubs. Everybody was using the same studios. Very easy to run into people. So that's how I got with that. And then the other ones, Graham, I'd known from the Hollies. So and I had sort of we brushed up against each other a number of times when he came to the States. Um, but Hendrix, the Stones, and those things, and then McCartney. Uh, you know, I'd known when I was back in England, so that's how I got to know McCartney and Harrison. Um, and I'd go down to Abbey Road occasionally when they were recording. So that's how that relationship sort of came about. And then other ones like doing Michael Jackson being on something that was just a fluke. Happened to be in the studio at the same time, same building. A lot of it was just just the right place at the right time.
But I would imagine it speaks about who you are that they would ask you to be part of their recording. Not just that you were right there, but the fact that you were talented and you had something to offer. And in some cases, it wasn't even the guitar; it was the sitar that you played, or other instruments that you played on their
Yeah.
albums, which is quite interesting. I have to ask about Hendrix. I know you became friends with him, you were jamming with him, and then you were listening to a Bob Dylan album one day, and then he called you up a few days later to say, "Let's go in the studio and record this." Tell me about that relationship. Tell me about as a guitar player, witnessing somebody like Hendrix, what did you learn from him?
I learned that I should pick up another instrument. That's what I learned, basically. Um, I mean, the guy was awesome. It's just he was very creative in the studio, and yeah, he just. I mean, I was never he was never without a guitar in his hands most of the time. But I don't know. I mean, basically there again. I mean, it was easy. Where he was in this. He was in a club that everybody went to after hours, just having a drink, sitting by himself. And I just sort of sat down and started talking with him. And that's basically how I started a relationship with Hendrix. So, and that we get up and jam a couple of times in different places. Um, then actually, the part of the whole thing of me playing with him was that there was a rift with Noel Redding at the time. And we were seriously talking about me joining joining as on playing bass with Hendrix. So but that never came about. And then we basically were listening to somebody had an advanced copy of John Wesley Harding, and that's how I guess, picked up on the Dylan song, All Along the Watchtower. Decided that he was going to record it, and so we finished up in the studio. And I played on that and sang on Crosstown Traffic. And then there's a bunch of tracks that I did with him playing bass and sitar that never officially came out, but I think so. Not too long ago, come out. People were thinking that it was Brian Jones, but actually it's me playing the sitar and bass with Jimmy.
I guess you don't get credit for something like that.
I guess not. And
When you hear a song like All Along the Watchtower, or Listen to What the Man Said, or Street Fighting Man, when you're just out driving and those songs come on the radio, does it take you right back to the studio, or where do those songs take you?
um, yeah, I mean, you can it take you back to when you did it, basically, and just just they were cool records, especially Watchtower. So it was like, yeah, that's cool. It's me.
Yeah, and you've had some of your own cool records. So tell me, what is a hit song to you? What if I was to ask you, what's the definition of a hit song to you? How would you break that down?
A hit song?
Yeah,
I don't know. If I knew, I'd have a zillion of them.
but you did okay. You've had your share.
I've never had, other than a hole in my shoe, I've never had personally a hit song that I've written.
Other people have had hits with your songs,
Exactly.
and so how do you what do you
Well,
think
part of
about those
songwriting
songs?
for me was just part and parcel of doing what I do as a contemporary musician. Part of it was just to see what I could come up with. Part of it was that for financial reasons, um, I wanted other people to do my songs. I was writing like that. So those were the reasons for me, basically, that I really started writing. I just most of it was just I wanted to see I wanted to see what I could come up with. And it started out of traffic because at the time, there was a lot of, well, who the hell are we? What are we going to do? Well, we got Steve Winwood in here, and we know he's good, and he's had hits with Spencer Davis. But, what am I going to do in here? So I just basically then started writing.
The success of Feeling All Right by Joe Cocker, does that surprise you?
Well, I mean, he did the version I wish I'd have done. Let's put it that way. I mean, without his version, there wouldn't be the, you know, the songs could been covered by everybody and their grandmother. Basically, every bar band plays it, and it's got 60 over 60 major artists have covered it. So, but without his version, that wouldn't happen.
But it still comes down to the song, I think.
Well, it came
Like
down,
his
well, the
ver-
song is about, for me, the song is, I mean, if you put on the original version, i.e., my version, it is vastly different than the way Cocker did it. I mean, the song is about not feeling too good myself. That's what the song's about. It's not about feeling all right. That's the difference.
Okay. We Just Disagree was a big song for you.
It was a big song. My guy who played with me for 18 years, Jim Krieger, was one of the first things he'd ever written. And he basically said, I wrote this with you in mind, and played it to me one day. And I was like, yeah, that's a great song. We'll do that.
Are the harmonies him singing, or because they're beautiful harmonies in that
Harmonies
song?
are him and Mike Finnegan.
Let's talk about Mike Finnegan. I was actually with somebody a couple weeks ago, and he was telling me about Mike Finnegan. Mike Finnegan plays a large role in your latest blues album, and he was in your band for a while. Tell me a little bit about Mike.
Finnegan was in my band for a long time. A great band. Him, Jim Krieger, Gerald Johnson, great bass player, and Rick Jager. And they were in my band for let me think, at least three of my Columbia albums. And they're on Certified Live. They're all on Certified Live. It's a great version of Going Down Slow that Mike Finnegan does. If anybody wants to know about Mike Finnegan, then just play Going Down Slow off my Certified Live album. The guy was awesome. Great singer, great organ player. I mean, I just always wondered why he was never bigger as a solo artist than he was. Played with a lot of bands. Crosby, Stills and Nash, Bonnie Raitt. Um, and like I said, played with me for a number of years.
What a talent!
Huge talent.
It's a weird thing. I mean, some people make it as solo artists, some people don't. And he's obviously did quite well as a side person and as a band member,
Yeah.
and well respected and worked with all the greats. You were in that same position before you became a solo artist. You initially said that you weren't comfortable being a solo artist. At what point did you become comfortable being a solo artist?
I don't know. Never. um,
Like, you think of yourself more as a band person?
I mean, I'm not extrovert enough to really embrace standing up there on a stage in front of everybody. Doing this. It's not my real personality. So, but eventually, it's like anything. Eventually, you just, it's like a new shoes or a new something. You're a little uncomfortable at first, and then you just wear into them, and then it becomes easier to do.
Tell me about your new album, A Shade of Blues. Tell me how that came about.
Shade of Blues basically is it's basically something. I mean, I got a lot of requests over the years, excuse me, from fans that were Dave, do a blues album. When are you going to do a blues album? And I was like, I don't know, I don't know. And so eventually over the years I started just cutting different things. I mean, Dear Mr. Fantasy that's on there with me and Joe Bonamassa, for instance. Uh, him being on there is a little more recent, but the track itself, I mean, I recorded that 15 years ago. And a lot of the stuff on there is stuff that I recorded a number of years ago. There's about two or three new things on there, but Fantasy, Use It or Lose It, I cut 15 years ago. So eventually, um, I'd written a couple of new things. It's just you and me. Did that very rough one track on there that I've got to dust my blues. And so I had this all these tracks and stuff, and basically that's really in the end how it came together. Just it was like, you know what? I need to put all these together in one thing, and basically not and call it a shade of blues because it's not. There's some things on there that, though for me, I still relate them as like El Toro, the instrumental on there. I mean, I can classify that in the blues idiom because of the guitar playing, the electric guitar playing, which is a very blues influence. So it was, rather than that's why I have the title called "It's a Shade of Blues." That's basically how all that came together.
I'm curious, as a guitar player growing up in England at a certain time, how important was the blues to you in your growth as a guitar player in the early days?
Well, the early, if you're talking about the early when I first started, it was the blues um, stuff had no part in what I was wanting to do. It was all about Hank Marvin and the Shadows.
Right.
Um, but like everything, as you get a little older, and you just got exposed to different people. Wes Montgomery, George Benson, the blues players, and so on. Great violin players, and so you start to listen to more and more different styles of playing, and so that sort of just became a process of time for me. But originally, like I said, originally it was all about the Shadows for me and Hank Marvin.
I think your initial band, the Jaguars, was like the Shadows,
Very
was
much.
it not?
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you ever think about pursuing that sound as well, to go back and revisit the instrumental guitar bands?
Um, yeah, I kind of thought about it, but I don't know whether it would. I might. I mean, if I was going to do it, I might do it just for my own amusement at home and see what came out. I don't know if I would basically do it as a project. The only problem is, which people tell me not to harp about, but I have to, is that making an album is really the problem is that for an artist making an album is just an exercise in futility. Um, there's nobody buying albums. The only way you do anything anymore is how I started, which is just playing live. Without a live career, you got nothing.
Which makes total sense to me. I understand what you're saying, but so what made you do an album? Do you know what I mean? I mean, at some point or another, the industry changed and making an album made less sense, but you're still
Well,
putting
I
out
make I
albums.
make stuff. I do stuff because I have a studio at home, and I goof around doing stuff. Mostly, I make it because it's all part and parcel of going on the road, and so that's where these days that's where we sell most of this most albums or recorded product is on the road at the shows.
So will you be featuring a lot of stuff from A Shade of Blues?
We're like the Tupperware guy. Hi, it's me. It's Dave. I'll maybe do a couple of things. Most of the things I do on stage are a compilation of a lot of stuff over the years, and sometimes there's things in there that are not even mine.
I wonder. I mean, I presume that there's no way you can get away playing a concert and not doing certain songs of yours.
Well, yeah, basically. I mean, the thing is, my audience grew up with me. You know, they're dying off. it's it's an audience of diminishing returns.
I love your version of Los Sparks and Higher Boys in the new album. It's a very different arrangement. Was that an easy
Yeah.
arrangement to come up with?
Yeah, I really didn't have to think about it too much. It sort of just evolved. It was like, you know what? I wonder if this would work doing it this way. And mostly I did it like that as something I could do live and just have lots of room to play guitar. That's really the impetus for doing it the way I did it. But in doing it that way, I have to say that, I prefer the version to the original. I'm not part of the original one. I wasn't with the band, but I didn't very much, particularly, it wasn't something I liked very much. And I just think the way I'm doing it gives more weight to the lyrics of the song, I think,
Hmm.
that Jim wrote. So, and then we give a nod to the song by keeping the end as the same, that play out at the end. So, but yeah, it's like I said, I mostly did it because it gives me an opportunity to have a song whereby I'm I'm basically stuck with the verses, but the rest of it, instrumental wise, I get to do whatever I want every night.
Yeah. Well, it's a great version. It's an
Thank
interesting
you.
version, and it's different.
Yeah.
Do you still play the guitar every day?
I've never played the guitar every day.
Oh, you don't. Okay.
No,
Is the love that you have for the instrument and the guitar, is it still the same as it used to be?
I don't know. I mean, my actual fascination, I guess, and when I say the shadows, was the Fender Stratocaster, and I was drawn more to the design and the shape of the guitar than I think the guitar. So I'm just very much visually just struck by that design that Leo Fender came up with. It's pretty. I mean, it's amazing. It's an amazing design because it'll still look cool 1,000 years from now. It's one of those things that somebody came out of their head and it'll never look dated ever. It'll always look very cool, you know. And as a testament, there are so many manufacturers who've copied it. So, yeah, for me, it was all about the Fender Stratocaster. And other than when I was really young, and the guitar, and I take it. I mean, I take it to school with me, and but as I got older and older and older, I'd kind of I don't. I'm the worst. I don't practice. I don't. I don't pick it up every day. I just it's sort of it just became a tool to use for I know you have a certain dexterity. I mean, part of playing, I'm not one of those shredder players who play, 1,000 notes in 20 seconds. I can't, I don't have the dexterity to do that. And frankly, I don't know if I'd want to do that anyway. I'm more of that's why the blues and, one note sometimes means more than 20 notes. The rest is as important as the note you put in. So I'm economy of space, I suppose, and I've constructed some nice solos, and I can improvise my way around, a little bit, and I'm adequate at the guitar. You give me enough time with it, I'm cool with it. So,
I think you're
but
more than adequate. Um, are you a better guitar player today than you ever were, or do you not look at it that way?
um, gee, I don't know. I don't know actually. I mean, I'm maybe better in the sense that I know my way around better on it. And a lot of my stuff, especially live, is to a great extent improvised. I mean, the solo, any, that's why I do a lot of tunes with a lot of instrumental sections to them. Because it's the one place which is part of the whole aspect of playing live that I gravitate towards is it gives me a chance to. It's basically the solos are never exactly the same every night, and I need to do that. Otherwise, I get bored out of my skull. You know, if I had to be one of those artists that was just, you know, if all my material was like we just disagree, I'd probably stop playing. I'd be bored out of my skull. I wouldn't be able to do it. So part of me is I have to have room to improvise in amongst what I'm doing.
Well, thank God you do, and thank God you're still doing it. You've created some amazing music, and it's a real pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for doing this.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you.
And good luck on tour, and take care of yourself.
I will, and thank you again.